Hello, and welcome to this, what a surprise edition of the Purple Journal podcast. This time last week, I think Luke interjected that I had the most, at least excited, genuine hello in the history of the show. Now, it's all gone
back to normal. This is status quo.
Gone dark. I'm here
There's
with...
a comfort down here in this, land of uncertainty, disappointment, frustration.
We know how to operate when things are falling apart as fans, as writers of the Vikings. And that's all I got. Thanks for tuning in.
It's a good one, and we don't want to talk about it, and goodbye, good night.
Go! Joe, you just said it right there. You should be used to this kind of thing. I mean, come on. You gotta, how old are you? You gotta be bouncing back. I remember those days when loss on Sunday didn't start getting over till Wednesday when I started thinking about the next game and setting my fantasy line. I remember those days, but come on, man. This is Vikings way. They pick you up, they splatter you down.
I feel like it's getting harder as I get older. I fool myself into ignoring all of my, better judgment, and I just get so wrapped up into it. And then you have a game like the Saints game, and things go so well, and we had the viewing party, and we were all outside afterwards joking about or predicting the other shoe dropping and saying, this is the Vikings, something bad's going to happen, someone's going to get hurt, Bradford's going to get hurt, and it's like, what, we get 48 hours of pure bliss. And I said this last week, and I said, things like games like the Saints game are Super Bowl because things always turn sideways or we always blow it, but this is like almost a record in terms of going from ecstasy to just pure despair. I mean,
it happened before we even knew it. It was in the middle of the game, for crying out loud.
Yeah. So I don't know, but that's Joe Oberle in the background from the Sports Post. He's a senior writer for the Purple PTSD website. And I guess the optimist. Things are dark when Joe's the optimist on the show.
I think I'm more optimistic than the both of you.
It's dispassionate detachment. That's what you got to get, Joe. All the hardened sports ink-stained wretches have. That's what you got to get. I'm kidding.
Would have been a great name for the show. Instead of Purple Journal podcast, dispassionate detachment.
Dispassionate detachment sounds like an alt rock band.
Yeah, an emo rock band.
Yeah.
And that is Luke Braun, senior writer for Purple PTSD / dispassionatedetachment.com.
Luke's on lead guitar.
Oh Jesus! Don't make me do that.
You're leading the parade this week. That you're more optimistic.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll get into that, but yeah, why? What's
we'll get into it. But the gist is like, oh my God, this isn't like Teddy's leg falling off. He'll miss a few weeks, maybe 2, maybe 4, something like that, and then he'll be back, and we'll maybe take a loss or two we wouldn't have otherwise taken, and that sucks a little. Like people are acting like it's Teddy's leg falling off again, and it's like, holy crap, the season's not over.
And I wonder where that comes from outside of just muscle memory, or
it's absolutely muscle memory, and it's coming off of a pretty ugly loss to a better team, which I don't know why so many people didn't see that coming. But it's people thought we were going to go to the Super Bowl after that freaking Saints game, and then we lost to an objectively better team, and then the quarterback got a ding that's going to sideline him for a few weeks, and now everybody's overreacting to that, just like they overreacted to the Saints game. They only just need to calm the F down.
I guess the question I have about that is, and this is kind of the first talker that we were going to go into anyway, so good job, dude. How much of that comes from the way that Zimmer handles injuries?
I was just going to say that. I was just going to say that, Joe.
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be, when you have a coach, and I did read that he apologized for this, but he didn't elaborate on it at all after apologizing, and I don't know if that's because he didn't have any additional information. I know, Joe, you would be more knowledgeable about this than I would, but he comes after the game, says Bradford's fine, but he might be out a week or 6 weeks, and that's it. And then he comes and talks to the media earlier in the week and says, I apologize for my curt response, but I don't have a crystal ball and I can't answer questions that I don't have the answers to. So you have people speculating, and you think, it comes out that it might be a bone bruise from, I think, NFL Network. Do you think if he handled, I guess, what's the, on top of that too, a second part of that question is there any actual competitive advantage from doing that?
I think that's ingrained in all, coordinators' minds and even coaches. I mean, if you've ever listened to them for a long period of time, they never want to say anything that could put their team at a disadvantage, a competitive disadvantage. Someone said that somewhere along the line, and maybe because you don't want to put it out there that so and so has a knee injury, because that's exactly where the defense will go tackle. I mean, back in the days of George Mikan playing basketball, I mean, that's the exact kind of stuff they did. I don't know how much the NFL lets you do that anymore, but as far as the way Zimmer handles it, he's very emotional, and I to a fault, actually, because all the reporters, I feel, are really looking for is they just want to understand. Just let us understand what's going on here. He hurt his knee. It happened during the game on a play. We're going to reevaluate it, and if he handled it like that, rather than the kind of petulant, "Oh, he'll be fine." And then get sarcastic about it and say it could be 1 week, could be 6 weeks, and maybe that's the truth. But he said the next day that he was being facetious about that. And, that's just going to engender the ire of the press. And Brian Murphy wrote a story in the St. Paul paper that basically said that. He said that this kind of deal is getting old, And, for all of the reasons we like Zimmer as a guy who wears his emotions on his sleeve and is generally going to tell you the straight story. When it comes to injuries, he doesn't want to, I think, for that reason that you mentioned, competitive disadvantage. Yet, and I think he can't lie, or he doesn't want to lie, and so he takes this other tack. And anytime you talk to him right after the game, if it's a loss, I mean, the man is just bitter. And he said the next day that they didn't have any wine for him to cool down after the game. So that could be a whole nother issue. But, I agree with you, your assertion that if he handled it slightly differently, it might not be the firestorm that it becomes. Give the reporters something they can sink their teeth into and report some facts, but you don't have to give them everything and let them, and everybody goes on with their life, I think.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Joe. You have to understand that this back and forth with the media is part of it. It's their job to ask, and if you get mad at them for asking, you're just kind of, grinding against nothing. You're pushing against the wall. It's not going to change. They're still going to ask about it.
Right.
But I also think at the same time, the coach was mean after a loss, and if that's going to be your think piece, I feel like there's so much interesting stuff after a game, especially after a loss, that there is to write about and talk about. I don't know. That feels like you're just stooping to his level if you're going to write a think piece about how mean the coach was to you in the press conference. Come on. I think both sides can be better. Not that makes what Mike Zimmer said, that doesn't make his attitude acceptable, but I think there's a high road to take. And I think there were a lot of media members that didn't take it, especially strip guys that I don't like the strip guys, and I don't really like their work anyways, but Well,
the question do you think that, a lot of the time we've talked about this before, because I get caught up a lot in interacting with the readers of our site or sites, and so I get a lot of that mindset, or I feel like that's a lot of how people feel in general, not just people who are active enough to comment on a Purple PTSD page, but and the reaction from you guys a lot of the time is the team doesn't care what a lot of these people have to say. I mean, they have to kind of weather the fact that football fans are crazy in the first place, but at some point does it become, by Zimmer doing that, I guess, does it create a larger problem for the team in any way where they're answering questions or the media becomes more involved or ESPN gets, in on it where they
I think until it starts affecting ticket sales or until you start getting all this negative stuff about, and until you start getting things like Mike Zimmer getting compared to Greg Schiano. I think Greg Schiano is a great example of exactly what you're talking about. Like, he was insane, or like Mike Singletary when he was the head coach of the 49ers. That's the kind of thing that I think will start affecting the team, and it'll get up to the owner, and the owner will get bothered by it, and GM will get bothered by it, and then they start to think about, taking action. But other than that, it's like, so someone wrote a mean thing in the whatever we have to practice against for Jameis Winston today. Okay. I don't think inside a team environment. I mean, the media is always going to write crap. The people have been writing crap about Trey Waynes every game, and they're going to keep writing it until he stops sucking. People are going to write weird crap about, Case Keenum if he has a bad game again. Like, it's just part of it. It's all just part of it.
It is, and I think from Zimmer's point of view is he's not going to give any help out his competition in any way. I mean, if he's certainly not going to say who's, he was asking today, what do you know when you're going to know who your starter is, and he said Sunday. He's not going to tell anybody beforehand because that allows him to force the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to quote unquote prepare for two quarterbacks.
That is actually real, and I would love to talk about it later.
Yeah, we should. Talking about that.
It is. It's something, and I've heard that said for forever. So he's not going to say that until he absolutely has to, And I understand that. I guess I would figure out a different way to come across to the press, and the way he apologized, the way he phrased his apology was, he said that the fans deserve better, and that was a good way to say it. It doesn't matter how he treats the press, but if he's not giving the fans what they want, or at least give them a little bit more, then it's shame on him, because that's, like Luke said, until it affects ticket sales. So.
And in his defense, I think each fan base is a little bit different, and it might take a while for him to understand some of the trials and tribulations that us fans have dealt with, and maybe some are more sensitive than others, or some are more used to certain things than others. So maybe he's not used to the sheer panic that comes from.
Well, he's got a ring. Does he care? He's got a ring.
Yeah. But since we're talking about it, when you have, I guess the best way to phrase this question is, when you have a quarterback who played as poorly as Keenum did, or so I've heard, on Sunday, do you think that there's that much of an advantage, or any advantage from outside of maybe having the team have to do extra, the coaches and the players have to do some extra work?
There's a huge style difference between Sam Bradford and Case Keenum. Sam Bradford is known for being, defaulting toward short passes, and Case Keenum is one of the most YOLO quarterbacks in the league. I think despite, he is so YOLO. I mean, you saw it last week. The play would be busted, and he would just heave it up to the deepest guy, which I kind of love, because why not, right? If it's a throwaway, it's a throwaway. But that
he's also more asked to run too. So. That
changes the way so if you're preparing for Case Keenum, if Mike Zimmer came out and said, yep, he's got a bone bruise and it's going to be 2 weeks and that's the timetable. The Bucs now say, okay, so we're preparing against Case Keenum, and then they can prepare for that sort of deep, they'll probably play a little bit more man coverage if you're going to be going, doing a lot more deep routes like that. They'll probably play more cover 3, cover 4 type schemes. Whereas if you're preparing for Sam Bradford, you're going to, play a little bit more zone with some underneath stuff. You're going to play a little bit more cover 2. So that, and when okay, I'm going to play a lot more, man coverage because it's Case Keenum and he likes to go deep, and I want to make sure that there's a guy in every deep route. You then will practice man coverage more throughout the week. And if you're going to, or you'll practice zone coverage throughout the week if you're going up against Sam Bradford. So, that changes things. And then when he comes out on Sunday and says, okay, yeah, no, Sam Bradford's playing, and you go, oh, shit, we practiced man all week, therein lies the competitive advantage.
Yeah, and to throw on top of that Keenum will bust out of the pocket and try to run a lot more than Bradford ever will. I mean, so I don't know, you don't necessarily, not in this case, but in some cases, you might have to have a spy on a quarterback, and if he's a really good running quarterback.
And you just don't know what game film to watch. You only really have so much time dedicated to watching tape. And are you going to sit there and pore over the Steelers game or the Saints game? Which one are you going to? I mean, you're going to watch both, but now you can't do as good a job on either.
So I guess there is a reason, competitive advantage wise, but
maybe don't be a dick about it, but
yeah, there's got to be different way to do it. I guess that's what I'm saying, and I think Zimmer realized that, and I thought he was, in fact, he ended the press conference on Monday. Someone, he said he had told everybody that he thought he was going to get the how Sam Bradford question, and nobody asked it. And so then, just as they were leaving, someone asked him, and he laughed, says, "I don't know," and smiled. And today, that was the first question right out of the gate. He got a chuckle out of. So I mean, it's kind of, the relationship is fine there. It's just these guys get fired up for these games, and which is good. You want your coach to do that. So I'm not gonna chastise him too much for being who he is and being, emotionally into his job. But maybe get him some wine after the game, I guess.
I think he's earned some liquor.
Let's get a GoFundMe.
You got to think about his tenure here too, and just the amount of, he doesn't get outside of 2015 a team that just gets to play and not have to deal with Adrian Peterson's child abuse thing, Teddy and AP getting hurt last year, and now it's like, a lot of people going back to the me interacting a lot with fans online before the season were saying, well, if Zimmer doesn't make the playoffs, you got to fire him, and we talked about that on the show, just how ludicrous that was. But you get to see the team he's put together, and Spielman's put together, and all the coaches have put together, play against the Saints. And granted, the Saints are terrible, but they looked amazing. And then Bradford gets hurt, and it's just another thing for him to deal with. So he has to feel a little bit frustrated about how things are going.
Absolutely. He wants Bradford in there every bit as much as anybody else, and he's probably just as disappointed that for the second year in a row, his starting quarterback, right around the beginning of the season is limping around and sitting on the bench. It's a tough deal. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's impossible to win without. I mean, we're seeing all kinds of teams deal with this. We got guys deciding between Jacoby Brissett and Scott Tolzien.
And we'll get into we'll talk about this real quick and then get into the updates about Bradford himself. But that touches on just how I would say strange. I mean, it makes sense. There's so many moving parts with the fact that fans actually buy the tickets and the merchandise, and nobody wants a PR problem in the NFL, especially in 2017. But I wrote a record-breaking, amazing Pulitzer Prize eventual winning article about the fact that Kaepernick is still available, and the NFL's having quarterback problems, like you said, Luke, and the Vikings, especially earlier in this week when there was a lot up in the air. Some people were talking about, well, what about Kaepernick? Because this time last year we gave up a first-round pick to go out and get Bradford. Kaepernick would probably cost you the veteran minimum, and obviously no draft picks. My point wasn't so much that I was going to make a political statement one way or the other, because I try to avoid doing that, even though that's kind of my wheelhouse as a political science major, which explains why I'm a writer, because you can't really get work with a poli-sci degree, or in that field anyway. It was more just...
Wow.
What was that?
I said you can with writing? Wow. Okay.
You see? Bad decisions all around from Joe Johnson. But it was just that, I'm a pretty emotional guy when it comes to the team, obviously. And I just felt like if it came down to it, I don't care about any of that. Like, I've always been the type of person, unless it's super egregious, like a Ray Rice situation, that, like, I just want the team to win. Obviously I'm not handling losing very well. Like, I just don't. I don't want to go 8-8 again or put another season with this defense, with this coach kind of up. Well, next year, everyone will be healthy when clearly that doesn't happen for us. So my point was, you know what, if your point is that Kaepernick should separate his politics from football, then we should separate our politics from football and respect the fact that people have the ability to state their point of view in this country. And then just the question becomes, do you want to win, or do you at least try to win, or do you want to say, well, better luck next year? And I'm just not ready to do that yet. I'm still too closely attached to the thoughts from Monday Night Football. Not that Kaepernick's some sort of amazing answer or anything, but he's at least starter quality. I mean, he should have a job, at least a backup
He's
job.
a better quarterback than Case Keenum, and I don't think it's particularly close.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the point. So it blew up
Like,
for
there's
obvious
really no way to
reasons.
prove that Case Keenum is a better quarterback than Colin Kaepernick
Somebody
outside
told
of
me-
overt racism.
Well, somebody told me Case Keenum was a baller in college. I'm like, well, how many ballers in college work at
What the
car
hell?
dealerships now, you know? So yeah,
I read somewhere that Kaepernick also wants to start, and of course you should. Everybody should, but I mean, the Vikings. Well, maybe he would start here with if Bradford's going to be out for another whole season. But you know, I mean that. I don't know if he wants starter money, but I think that's the part of the role, and that's a distraction as well. I'm not in any way justifying. I don't understand why he has a job. Doesn't have a job. I don't get it. And whatever he wants to do with the national anthem is his deal. That's fine. He can. He gets to do that. And if you're not signing him because of that, then you're a pinhead. You know.
Especially when so many guys are doing the exact same thing he did. I know that he was the poster boy for it. But how many people are going to kneel in U.S. Bank Stadium this season? A lot. So it's
and it's like Suhan said the other day. It's a peaceful protest. It's a peaceful protest. You know, would you rather blackball somebody because they're hitting their kid with a switch, or or punching their girlfriend on camera, or would you feel about than this? You know, what's the deal here? So I don't get it, but I also don't. You know, all things being equal, if this was never part of it, I don't know if I'd be clamoring to get him, to bring him in as a starter. Now, is he better than Case Keenum? Yes, I agree. But I don't know how good. I mean, he kind of fell off. His style of play is a little bit different. You know, he's not a pocket passer either, and that's what Shermer wants. You know, he's a bit of a scrambler and that kind of deal too, as far as I know. And maybe Luke, you can speak further to it, but he's
a scrambler in the way that Teddy's a scrambler, but he's capable of being a pocket passer for sure. He proved that many times over last season.
You know,
He had a good record last season on a rotten team too. So
I really do think that
They played well.
the owners know that this article blew up for a reason, and it's not just because that people in Minnesota love the backup or the quarterback or that situation. That's a huge part of it. But we had over almost 1,000 comments on our Facebook, and most of them were either no or hell no or some variation of I'll never be a Vikings fan again, or I won't watch the team. And I think people and I think people somehow have conflated what he's doing with him disrespecting the military, and that's maybe a PR problem with with the approach he's taken. But I think that's more of a, not to get too political, but that's what a lot of the right wing's good at, framing issues. And when he started doing it, they attached the military to it, and obviously no one wants to disrespect the military, especially during a time of war. So people think that, like, I've had people on our Facebook page who are in the military, active duty or retired, saying, I fought for this country, and it's like a huge slap to my face and people that I love to disrespect the military that way. And the national anthem isn't like the military anthem, so I don't understand
with the flag
how
is
that
a big
works.
deal. To anybody in the military, Joe, the flag is a huge deal. It's synonymous with them. So I would differ with you on that, but he's not.
My point is that he's not doing it overtly. I mean, he might be ignorant of that, like I am, but he's not doing it to protest the military.
No.
In and of itself.
No, he's not.
So, I mean, cut him
I
some
think
slack.
I think we should really like check our moral high ground on this too. You know, if your argument basically is that, you know, Colin Kaepernick shouldn't be on a team because he did something morally reprehensible, which is kind of at the root of, you know, what people are angry with him about, is that what he did, whether it's because it disrespected the military or the flag or whatever, it is morally reprehensible. This team has a player who has been convicted of multiple DUIs, including an extreme one, in the same position group and the same room as a kid whose mother was killed via DUI in 2013 in Rodney Adams. And you have them in the same room, you know, with each other, like being next to each other. So I think we need to check our moral high ground here. Like, this, you can be annoyed with what he did, but this league consistently employs domestic abusers, accused rapists. I mean, these guys are awful people. So, like, a lot of these people are awful people.
That's the whole thing. I don't think the NFL is really the place, like you just said, to suddenly say, well, this is the type of scumbag I don't like, but all the other scumbags are
totally
fine by
fine
me.
with this kind of scumbag.
Yeah,
like,
I
come
mean,
on.
It's
We're here to watch a sport. It's okay.
Didn't Brett Favre sext his some gal out?
Yeah, he sent his Johnson out to I forget who, the reporter,
to the gal out in New York, and then
masseuse.
he was signed. And then he was signed here. So yes.
Speaking of which, I've been I'm kind of friends and been hanging out with a girl that used to be the therapeutic masseuse for the Packers. And speaking of scumbags, yeah, there's lots of that. So yeah, it's just, you know, these guys are human beings, and they have a lot of money, and a lot of the time they're not the smartest guys in the world. And they operate through aggression. That's what they get rewarded for. So it's just, yeah. Either you say I like football enough to kind of not worry about that too much, or you don't. So
what it's got to come down to is they must feel that he's not going to be out for an extended period, and they got another quarterback who could potentially, I'm not saying he's going to, come off the IR in 6 weeks or whatever it is. So they've got plenty of quarterbacks around here that they're paying money to, you know, and so they have to wade this out and see what it happens and see what it is, and you know, and so I think if you start kicking the tires on Kaepernick now, then the panic should set in about what's up with Bradford, you know.
And so what did you were at Winter Park today, right, Joe?
Yep.
And so, and I know he got a cortisone shot yesterday, and he was limited in practice yesterday also.
He did not. Did he say that?
I just read that in an article that was talking about his press conference today, and also said that he was limited in practice yesterday. So I don't know if he said that or if just the article was saying that.
He didn't cop to any. People asked him about shots he was taking. He would not comment on that, whether he did or didn't. And what he did say is that it happened in the game on Sunday. He started
non-contact, right?
Right. He was planting his plant foot, and when he was throwing a pass, and it's the knee that he had operated on twice for ACL, and he said that it started hurting as the game went on Tuesday. It was all swollen up and really sore the next day, and that's what, they must have done an MRI and figured out to be a bone bruise, which is something you can definitely get when you got bone on bone and not much cartilage in your knee. And I would think after 2 ACL surgeries, that's ACL, but it's possible you probably lost some cartilage there too. I've had 4 cartilage surgeries and 1 ACL, and I have nothing left. And so I've experienced that pain before. Like I was telling these guys earlier, I was right back in it the next week, so I don't know what his deal is. But but
that'll be the title of the show. Joe is tougher than Sam Bradford.
Please make that the title of the podcast. Oh my God.
He's got to be, like he said, and even Zimmer said, he's got to be able to protect himself. He's got to be able to do what a quarterback needs to do. And it is a painful thing, bone on bone hitting bone. And I don't know if I guess going into Winter Park today, I was thinking he has no shot. They trotted Case Keenum out there first, and Case sounded like he was a guy who was preparing to start, which he's got to be doing. And they brought Bradford out there, and he was very open about what was going on. But he said, we'll see. I felt better yesterday, and I'm feeling better. I'm doing the treatment, and at the end of practice, or at the media got a chance to see him throw some passes. He wasn't moving much, but he was throwing passes, and he was limited, and limited is better than not in practice. Exactly.
Yeah, so, he was limited all week last week too.
He's moving in the right direction. It could take a long time. I'm just wondering if it's some pain tolerance, that you shoot him with something that numbs the pain, and you say, okay, this isn't going to get better for a while, and we're paying you to play quarterback. You got to play. And
I don't think it's pain tolerance.
I mean, it's got to be part of it.
Sure. I think it's ability. I think it's the fact that you watched him throw in the video that came out today, and he wasn't stepping into his throw. And that's, if he can't step into his throw, then he can't throw good passes. And then at that point, he's going to be a worse quarterback than me out there.
Do you think, however, that Brett Favre would have sat out a game with a bone bruise in his knee? Do you think he would have? I don't think so. So, I mean, pain, yes, ability to do what
and it would have been a real bad choice.
Right, but, at some point, you have to move past whatever it is you're doing, or you got to do, and suck it up and go out there. And I'm not saying he's a wimp. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, knowing how painful it is. I mean, the reason he's not stepping into it is because it probably hurts like hell. Knowing it from experience, but we'll see.
Should we be worried then? I said this off the air also. I wrote sort of just a quick jotting of all the quarterback-related stuff earlier this week, about the Vikings expressing confidence in Keenum, and the fact that Teddy was going to be available mid-season, and the injection stuff. And I thought that if it was a bone bruise, then that's probably the best possible outcome, because there's no problems with the ACL and the ligament surgeries that he's had. But if he doesn't have any cartilage in his knee, isn't that something we should worry about? Being not only from a team perspective, like a season-long chronic issue. I know that one of the headlines from his press conference today was that Bradford didn't want it to become a chronic problem, or he was worried about it becoming a chronic problem.
If he was, that's because he wouldn't have anything in his knee to protect it. No, there is no cartilage. He never said that. That's speculation. I don't know. I haven't gone back and looked at his medical records to see if they snipped out a bunch of his cartilage in those 2 ACL surgeries. But that if it's chronic, it wouldn't be chronic because it would last forever. Eventually, it would heal. But it sounds like it's easy enough to hurt it again if there's nothing between the bones to protect it.
Okay.
We're going way too far into the weeds here. We don't know anything about what that MRI did. I don't think a bone bruise is true. I don't think he had a brace on his knee. You don't do that for a bone bruise, and bone bruises non-contact doesn't make any sense. I think that's a lie to us. But we're going way too far into. We're going way too far into the medical weeds here with what's wrong with Sam Bradford's knee. Something's wrong with it.
A bone bruise is definitely possible. Well, non-contact. Absolutely, I've done it.
Okay, can you explain to me how that works? Because that just intuitively doesn't make sense to me, and I would love to hear that. And that's a thing that I've seen around too, so I think that would be a good thing to dispel.
Well, just that you have no cartilage between your femur and whatever the other bone is below it, and
tibia.
He's stepping into a pass. All his weight is going forward, and so the bones hit each other, and there's nothing to cushion them, so there's a bruise there. That, or a contusion, I guess, would be the technical term, and it's very possible, and it's bone hitting on bone. I mean, I have bone scraping on bone all the time because I don't have any cartilage left, and it builds up bone spurs, and eventually have to have those scraped out of there. But I don't think that's what's going on. But if you impact it in some way and cause those 2 bones to hit together, it causes a bruise, and that's what the cartilage there is for in the first place. So I think it's definitely possible. If Teddy can make his leg fall off throwing a pass, I would think that man could bruise the bones in his knee. I don't know.
I would also like to mention that I have a political science degree, so I can talk about medical terms.
Yeah, we're just talking about a bunch of shit we don't know really.
We don't have the facts, right?
We don't have any of the facts. And if all of these things are true, then but we don't know if any of this information is good at all. And I just don't think it's productive to speculate about that. We're just going to talk till we're blue in the face, and then he'll play in 2 weeks, and we'll forget.
So the question is how long does Bradford have to live? No, but the doctor or the spokesman or whatever after the MRI did say that the MRI was negative, but when you've had the surgeries he's had, MRIs are basically useless anyway.
Right.
So, yeah, we don't know. Maybe the Vikings don't know. I mean, Zimmer said he doesn't have a crystal ball, so,
I honestly don't think they do. I think they're just going to test it every day, and eventually it'll stop being bad.
Right. And that's, my initial response is to panic.
And they're going to go to North Dallas 40 and get some of that stuff that they shot up Nick Nolte with, and he'll be good to go.
So hopefully he can play, because the question then becomes, do you think that this team can win over the next few weeks with Keenum? That's a loaded question because it kind of ties into the Steelers game a little bit, and that's probably a good thing.
We've had 35 minutes of podcast without talking about football, so...
Yeah, well, welcome to the Vikings, I guess. But I know that I admitted this off the air, and, I have no dignity left as a Vikings fan, so I didn't technically, quote-unquote, watch the game on Sunday. I woke up, I posted that it was a game-time decision for Bradford. I learned that he wasn't going to play, and I said, should I go back to sleep, or should I get in a horrible mood and then not be able to sleep? So I chose the adult answer from those two questions. But do you think that this Vikings team can win without Bradford for the next few weeks, or let's say Bradford's out and then Teddy comes back or whatever? But how are you guys feeling about the Keenum-led Vikings?
Tampa, yes. Detroit, I don't know. Chicago, yes. Green Bay, Baltimore, yes.
Jesus.
I think they can win with them. I think both he and the offensive line and the rest of the team is going to play a better game this week against Tampa Bay. The defense is going to be ticked off because the whole squad is mad at themselves for those penalties, and that's not going to happen again this week. Keenum is probably preparing to start, and it's going to make a difference in his performance. So I think they can. I wouldn't want to roll with them for the whole season and say they're going to make the playoffs, though.
Yeah. Case Keenum won't make the playoffs, but I think if you have, call it 3 games, I think he can maybe steal 1 or 2 of them. I think you can probably hang with the Bucs with Case Keenum, just because Jameis Winston's inaccuracy is going to create some turnovers, or his at least inconsistent accuracy is going to create some turnovers. I think, even though Deshaun Jackson and Mike Evans are both excellent, Deshaun Jackson hasn't really gotten going yet. And the Tampa Bay run game, I believe Doug Martin is still suspended, and that really hurts them. And their defense, I'm worried about Gerald McCoy, because Gerald McCoy up against Nick Easton, he'll probably be going against Nick Easton a lot, and Nick Easton he's been struggling for a couple of games now, even though he didn't give him pressure in the Saints game. He messed up a lot of run plays, so Gerald McCoy's probably going to be able to make a lot of noise. But all those things being said, I think Diggs and Thielen can get separation against this defense. I think Dalvin Cook can still make some, do the thing where he turns unsuccessful runs into successful runs just by, elite hit fluidity and just really good vision. And I think he can hang with this team. It'll be close. I'm glad we're at home. And I don't think it would be that close if we had Sam Bradford, but at the same time, I think even with Case, it'll be hard, but it isn't it isn't as soon as I found out Sam Bradford wasn't starting, I was like, oh, cool, this is a loss. I don't feel that way this time.
Okay. So you're saying I have to be awake for it?
It's worth watching.
You should, as the host of a Vikings podcast and owner of a Vikings website, you should maybe watch the Vikings.
Well, you were saying earlier
I'll write that down.
That we weren't we weren't operating under any facts, and I was going to say, if we're going to start requiring facts for this podcast, then Boy, I'm out of here. No.
So when it comes to the Steelers game, I mean, I know there was a lot of penalties. The defense, were those legit calls?
Yeah,
most of them
they
were.
were tight, but maybe some things that other refs would let slide. But they called a tight game, not necessarily an erroneous one.
They did. Yep.
Was it like a? I guess my main question is, and my main concern in watching or learning about the defense's struggles was that Trey Waynes had another bad game.
God, he was abysmal. I have a lot of problems with Trey Waynes right now. One thing that pissed me off a lot, like this is something that actually made me angry. There was a play. It was somebody jumped off sides and it was a free play and it was this big. It turned into this big deep completion to Martavis Bryant on Trey Waynes. He played about 10 yards off, and when you play off coverage, the whole idea is you give yourself enough cushion so that as the wide receiver is accelerating into a deep route, you have the time to like backpedal, read it, and turn your hips before he just blows right by you because you start backpedaling and he doesn't. So that's what cushion is for, right? So he gives himself all this cushion. It turns out to be a deep route, and he actually still waits till the guy's about 15, 16, 17 yards down the field to turn his hips. And when you give him cushion, you basically give up all the underneath stuff, right? Because if you're playing 10 yards off and he runs a 5-yard in, you have no way of defending that. You're 5 yards away from the guy. But if you don't turn your hips until he's 16, 17 yards there, you've given up all of your cushion and all of your advantage. So Trey Waynes literally played that play covering no routes, and I think that was a great microcosm of his game. He just doesn't know how to read a play at all.
That was bad to see. That was really bad, just the way you described it. Joe, you don't want to watch. You don't want to watch the game because
I watched some of it, to be honest.
You're a Trey Waynes bobo, so this would only make you sad.
I couldn't tell on the Bryant, the first touchdown, was that Newman that was running that covered him on that?
Yes.
Okay.
Not even. That's why you might see some Tremaine Brock this week.
I actually think Newman did okay on that touchdown because I think it looked like that was a play where he was supposed to funnel the wide receiver inside and get safety help, and I think Sendejo was inexcusably late to it.
Yeah.
I don't think Pro Football Focus attributed that play to Sendejo, but in my opinion, I would. Because Sendejo got a really good grade, and that play was like really, really bad.
It was. You said about the penalties. Yes, Brian Robeson was offsides. Oh
my God!
I wanted to leap through the screen and say, you're one of the most experienced people on this team. How could you do that?
Oldest trick in the book.
Yeah, I know. And you should be used to it, having played against Aaron Rodgers for how many times?
And with Teddy Bridgewater, who also had a very good hard count.
Yes, that really. That was the people like to call it the turning point, but that kept that drive alive. And then Xavier Rhodes had a PI on the next play and way downfield, and they ended up scoring the first touchdown, and the second touchdown came close behind it, and they were shell shocked. The game was over, and they never recovered. So don't watch it.
I think with the penalties, the stat line of the penalties, it was something like 160 or so, like 100 and some yards of penalties. I think that's a little 131. Yeah, it was a little misleading because a lot of those penalties were big long pass interferences on players who were beat, and that's not to say that those are like not bad plays. They're awful plays. But when you hear about all that penalty yardage, you think discipline, and you think like, oh well, they kept making mental mistakes. It wasn't mental mistakes. It was things like Xavier Rhodes was beat on that pass interference, and he committed a pass interference because if he didn't, it was likely a touchdown. And Trey Waynes had a play like that too, and I think that accounts for like over half of the penalty yardage. So I think it's important to understand that penalty yardage is not a matter of discipline or mental mistakes. It was a matter of poor play.
There was also a phantom on Mike Remmers that I don't know where it was, and that killed a good run outside by Cook too. So yeah,
I don't remember that one, but there were some calls that were like not great, but like I think it's just important to remember that like when you hear penalty yardage, it's important to properly diagnose what the actual problem was. And I don't think it's better. Like I would rather it be mental mistakes honestly than like the corners had bad plays, but.
But 11 penalties is a bad number, though.
right? And screw that stupid field goal penalty. He lined up over the center and he should know better. But like it was like inches, and it was stupid Pete Morelli nitpicking, and I hate that. Makes the game worse.
Agreed.
Like, it's especially with Xavier Rhodes and Antonio Brown. That's such a premier matchup of two, superstars, and calling a game really tight like that. While I understand the reasoning behind it, like let the guys play. That's just so bad for football when you have you just neuter such a great matchup by not letting them be physical.
I would agree. Until a penalty should have gone the Vikings away, and I would have wanted it called. Just kidding.
That's the thing. I don't even care if Antonio Brown committed OPI all day, but it was really fun to watch. I would much rather have that than have them call a whole bunch of flags and have the game be completely decided by it.
Yeah, they were definitely going to call it tight. There's no question about it.
I hate that.
How much rope do you think they give Forbath with missed PATs?
I think that you got to roll with them for the season for right now. I don't think it's going to be a continual thing, and if they don't, that was another Zimmer. They asked him about it. They asked Forbath about it, and he says not a big deal. And then Zimmer said yes, it is a big deal, and that's not the kind of thing that you want to do to your kickers. It may have contributed to the psyche of Blair Walsh last year, but
who also missed a PAT, by the way.
Oh, good. That's good to hear. But I think you got to roll with him. He's been solid on field goals, and just tell him before he goes out in the field that this kick is for 3 points, and he'll be fine.
Yeah, it's so strange how that works.
One of the weirdest stats in football to me is the discrepancy between extra point percentage and 33-yard field goal percentage.
Yeah, I wonder. I was really against that rule change.
Mental.
It's so mental.
I was going to say, is it because they're creatures of habit and it's just a new thing for them and they're
it's just a weird, it's just a contextual thing. Like, it has to be mental, right? Because field goals from 30 to 35 yards haven't really changed since that rule change. But extra points have plummeted. And it's not just Kai Forbath. I think one of the reasons you stick with Kai Forbath is because, everybody else's kicker is missing extra points too. And, these are all people who are getting jobs over the guys you'd be hiring. So I just don't know if, I think we kind of have to come to terms with, as football fans, the fact that extra points aren't going to be automatic anymore. And I like that. I think that makes football more interesting, but it's not, oh, you missed an extra point that's inexcusable. It's, you missed an extra point that's extremely bad, but it's no longer going to be a 99% play.
And don't you get to choose where you kick it from on an extra point? I mean, which hash?
That was my question. If it's an angle that they're not happy with or something, or maybe they're just pissed about the rule change and that's stuck in their head.
Central.
Right up the middle.
I don't remember. I don't know.
I think you can. I think you can line it up where you want, but I've seen them. Most of them kick it straight down the middle. But
yeah. I'm just I guess I'm I'm anti-rule change, When it comes to physical football, I look back at I don't know if it's a conspiracy theory or not, but what is it, Jim Irsay wanted to beat the Patriots, so he made it so their defense, it was harder to cover the Colts wide receivers. I don't know. I think, obviously, I put football on this pedestal, and I think it was pretty good the way it was, so I don't... As a Vikings fan, I think any additional variables that create drama are a net negative for the team because obviously history proves that to be correct. So
I like the new. I like that there's some reason to watch this kick, the extra point. And the fact that teams go for two. How about that?
Teams need to start freaking going for two. They need to learn.
I'll talk to you guys when we are Super Bowl away from, or extra point away from going to the Super Bowl, and we miss it. I've always envisioned that since that rule change, and I'm pretty sure it's going to happen. I can see it.
It'll definitely happen, but I don't think we'll be in an NFC Championship game soon enough for it to happen to us.
Yeah, I'll be dead.
Ain't that the truth? Before we kind of touch on the Tampa game a little bit, what was up with the offensive line?
Nick Easton was a disaster.
No.
He was a true catastrophe in the whole game. He couldn't pull.
Yeah.
He got blown up by. I mean, he got blown up by like Cam Hayward a lot, and Cam Hayward's a very good player. So there's not, there's a certain degree of level of competition to it. Just like we kind of took the Saints game with a grain of salt, we have to take this with a grain of salt too, because the Steelers have a good defense. Ryan Shazier was really good as well. There's a great low light of Joe Berger just getting dropped like 5 yards by Ryan Shazier, which is just hilarious. I couldn't stop watching it, but it was just I don't think this is representative of the offensive line, just like I don't think the Saints game was. I think the truth is going to be somewhere in between. But Nick Easton is not learning. He's just not an elite player. We knew that. I mean, he had a good preseason, but we knew he wasn't an elite player, and we knew we were getting into this when we cut Boone.
That all said, Zimmer and even Case Keenum both said the past 2 days that the problems with him either being rushed, being hit, not getting the ball out when he's supposed to, whatever. It was on him. It was a combination of both the line play and some of the calls he was making that was different than they were used to as far as Sam Bradford was concerned. So he wasn't. Zimmer didn't. None of them wanted to hang it all on the line for some of the problems. He was taking his share as well. But that said, I think Luke was right. Nick Easton had some issues, and he's probably really going to have some issues on Sunday.
There were run blocking issues as well. I will say that Case Keenum does read the field very slowly. There were a lot of plays where he missed throwing windows, and some plays where he had throwing windows for a long time. There was one. It ended up being a first down, so it'll log well in all the stats. But it was like a curl route to Diggs or something, or maybe it was Rudolph. And they were sitting there open. The receiver was just sitting there open for like 2 seconds before Case Keenum threw it, and it ended up being a contested catch when it didn't need to be. And then there was that circus Kyle Rudolph catch that was inaccurate. He's clearly not a starting quality quarterback, but that's what you get when your starter gets hurt.
I heard there was a play that Diggs was wide open, but Keenum threw it to the sideline for no reason.
And there was a busted coverage that Keenum really badly overthrew, and it was really bad. Sam Bradford would have had a touchdown there.
Reading the field well and quickly is the biggest difference between elite and non-elite right there.
It's a game of inches. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so would you say, Luke, I guess my reaction with Easton is that obviously he hasn't played guard for a while. I mean, do you think that there's room for improvement? Or is this line just going to get beat by good defenses?
I think he is who he is. This line's going to give up pressure a lot. You don't fix it in one off season by cutting, the best player on the line last year.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with it, was when do we start talking? I mean, granted, you said grain of salt, but when are we going to look back and sort of regret the Boone move at some point?
2 seconds after it happened?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember when we talked about that, but, it seemed like, at the reasoning was, well, Easton and Elfline, that unit played better in the preseason than Boone, and Boone gets hurt. But
yeah, I think Arif nailed it in an article he wrote about the move when the move happened. He basically just said it's arguable that Easton had a better preseason, but cutting him for depth is just baffling without some other sort of context. And I think we're seeing I don't think it's very arguable that cutting team does not make the team worse. It makes the team worse, and I don't think there's much room to argue against that. We're seeing the benefit. We're seeing the result of that. That's part of it when you cut a quality player.
Well, this is maybe I came into this pretty down, but I might just pack it in for the rest of the season, man. Yikes.
So, let me talk you off the ledge.
So let's talk about Tampa.
This needs to be said. I feel like it needs to be said to talk some people off the ledge. The Steelers are an elite team. There were a ton of plays in that Steelers game that were, especially run plays, that were unsuccessful, that Le'Veon Bell is just elite and turned into successful runs. That kind of stuff does not project into the future. Ben Roethlisberger is an unbelievable quarterback under pressure. Antonio Brown and Martavis Bryant are two very, very good receivers. Their defense is great. Ryan Shazier is great. They have a good defensive line. There are things about this was probably the hardest game on the schedule. And I guess it's the Wednesday after the first loss, and people are talking about tanking for draft picks and firing everyone. Like, I just need to talk everyone off the ledge and say, listen, we didn't have the starting quarterback. We didn't, the team is not functioning the way it was built because we are not able to put the team on the field the way it was built, and that sucks. And it was also probably, I think that's going to be harder than even the Packers in Lambeau because at least they're a divisional opponent and we know them a little better. Yeah. That game was not going to be a win under many circumstances. It would have taken a lot. It would have taken a lot of luck and a lot of better circumstance, and it would have taken our starting quarterback. So the fact that we lost in Pittsburgh is not going to be a reason to start panicking and giving up on the season. And I need to talk you folks off the ledge because you're a bunch of panic monsters.
I don't know if I just feel like it's hard to say without Bradford playing, but I think it did expose some things about this team that maybe.
It's hard to win with 130 yards of penalties, even with your starting quarterback, and it's also hard to win without your starting quarterback, even if you remove the penalties. There's a lot of things confounded, but a lot of those things are also things that aren't going to project to future games. We're not going to have to go up against
defense. They have a much better defense than the Saints did. That's bottom line. And
right.
You throw in a backup quarterback in his first start with a new team. It's like, come on.
If you expected the team to win and play well in that situation, you're an idiot.
That's why I slept comfortably on Sunday.
You know how to manage PTSD that way, Joe. You know how to manage it.
Do I?
I think so.
The jury's still out on that one. But the Tampa game's coming up, and kind of just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on. We touched on this a lot throughout the show, or at least you guys did. But some of the keys to the game. It's so hard to, in the same way that it's hard for teams to game plan, I guess, against the uncertainty, it's really hard for us to kind of talk about it, not knowing what's going to happen. But I guess we could just say, assuming Case Keenum plays, what would be the keys to the game for you?
Well, Luke, are you going to go with the same one as last week? Because I think it's standing out there like a sore thumb.
What, the bold prediction?
No. The matchup you talked about last week was Latavius Bryant on Trey Waynes. Well, this week it's
Deshaun
Jackson on Trey Waynes. So it's going to be more of the same. You'll have Xavier locked up with Mike Evans and getting physical, and they better let those two play since Evans.
That'll be so good if they let him play. It won't be Pete Morelli. Pete Morelli's a sticker.
So, but I think that's huge. I think you need to see a better game out of Case Keenum, and the line. I'd really like to see him give some room to roam for Dalvin Cook. The guy's just itching to bust out. And by the way, he got ripped off of a touchdown last week. And since I had my bad for him, I was bitter. What?
I felt so bad.
Oh God. How do you overturn that? It's just goofy. But anyway.
Yeah, it totally looked like not enough information. But whatever, they got the touchdown on the next play. And it was the hometown kid. Be happy for CJ.
Yes, Dalvin's going to get his share. That's fine. But anyway, I think you're going to see a better team game out of the defense. They're going to be more disciplined. They're going to be at home. They're going to have the crowd on their side. They're going to be fired up, kind of like they were on Monday night, because they want to put that stink of the Pittsburgh game behind them. And you got to see the line play and Keenum. Those are the keys for me in that matchup. Luke?
I think it's going to come down a lot to turnovers because it doesn't seem – I don't feel very optimistic about Sam Bradford playing. I think we're going to have Case Keenum again. I think it's going to come down to turnovers on the defense. They haven't been able to create them yet, and if you're going to be able to create them against anybody, it's Jameis Winston, who is a very aggressive quarterback, and he also has sporadic accuracy, and he's still, even to this year, his accuracy doesn't look to have improved. He's an unbelievably talented quarterback with a lot of ability, but sometimes he misfires, and when he misfires, if the defense can take advantage, I think they'll be able to, swing the momentum and turn this into a win. I think that's got to be the biggest thing is defensive turnovers. Case Keenum is going to have to, hopefully having, probably been the guy for all of practice and kind of, having a little bit better context, hopefully he can have a little bit better rhythm and timing because the timing was way, way off last week, and I hope they can fix that. The Bucs defense also is, I mean, they have Quan Alexander, and do they have Quan? He might still be suspended. And they have Gerald McCoy, and some promising young players like Vernon Hargreaves. But they're not the Steelers. So hopefully we won't see just that like ineptitude. Hopefully you won't see these pass interference penalties that, get logged as discipline, but it's really just because, Xavier Rhodes just got beat by Antonio Brown, which like who doesn't? Hopefully you won't see that. I don't know if I feel as worried about Deshaun Jackson as I did about Martavis Bryant, just because Deshaun Jackson's been super quiet thus far, so far this season, and it's been the Mike Evans show. And I think...
How old is he now?
I have no idea. Not old enough, I don't think, to be. I think he's still in his 20s.
They've only had the one game, though. So
they did only have the one game.
Yeah, and the targets were 9-7. Evans for 9 and 7 for Deshaun. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, when I was doing my preview, I was checking that out, and so they're I think Winston's he's trying to spread it around a little more, not just go so Evans heavy. So
right. I don't think Xavier Rhodes is going to shadow in this game. He didn't shadow in the Saints game. There was a great Matt Harmon was doing some next gen stats stuff, and Xavier Rhodes, he did just stay to the one side of the field and let the Saints dictate the matchups, which I thought was going to go poorly, but obviously that worked out. And he did shadow Antonio Brown. I don't think he's going to shadow this time because you don't just want to leave. Like, whether he's covering Mike Evans or Deshaun Jackson, it's not like he's both of those guys deserve Xavier Rhodes. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is going to come down to, getting pressure on Jameis Winston and forcing turnovers.
Deshaun Jackson's 30. He'll be 31.
He is 30.
He'll be 31.
I'm wrong about all these things.
He'll be 31 in December. I just thought he was older just because I was thinking of how much crap they gave him in Silver Linings Playbook for that early spike.
Oh my God, that is an all-time play though. That's Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that's going to be attached to him forever. I worry about Keenum just because in watching him at training camp, it seemed like he was on a different planet than the receivers. Like he couldn't connect to anybody. And when talking about the game last week with timing issues, it's like I know he hasn't had a ton of time with the ones, but you wonder if that's just how it's going to be or if he's going to be able to fix it.
You've got another week of practice.
So we have a couple minutes left. We should probably get into the predictions from last week, and I kind of know from a text that Luke sent me how things went down last week. I don't know how that. My initial response was, "Man, I'm screwed. I'm never going to be able to catch back up." But
yeah.
I thought
we both missed by exactly 20.
20. Yeah, I was a little disappointed when I checked it out because I thought I might have gained a little more ground, but no blood.
Yeah. OG, you missed the Steelers by more. Joe, you got the Steelers almost exactly right, but you had the Vikings getting 27 rather than 9, so you guys both missed by exactly 20, meaning OG, you still have a slight lead.
What was the lead last week?
4 points.
It's a 4-point lead. It's 31 to 27.
This might be better than the actual season.
This is gonna be fun, y'all.
This is getting good, and I've gone this entire show without mentioning that I basically almost doubled Joe in fantasy in the Purple PTSD Fantasy League this week, which is my Super Bowl.
What does it record as on on your tally? Was it just a win? One win, right?
What do you mean?
I mean, he was talking about doubling me. It's irrelevant. It's a win. A win, Joe.
Not to me.
Settle down.
Not to me. Every point was like just pure. Oh man, I'm telling you.
I need to go commune with my garden gnome.
The show's over. We cut you off. You know what's sad is we gave away like 10 gnomes at the viewing party, but I kept one because I understood that I would never win one on my own. Now I can't even look at it. It's like a representation of all of my failures.
All right, we're going long. What are your scores?
23-17 Vikes.
Ooh.
Not always predicting wins.
I am going to go 17-14 Vikings.
17-14. All right, there it is. So I am going to say that I'm going to get a little bit unorthodox with this, but I think the game will hinge on the over-under. I'm going to set the over-under for Jameis Winston turnovers at 1.5. Be they interceptions or like sack fumbles or whatever. And if we're over it, we win, and if we're under it, we lose, and that's going to be the definitive thing.
I just got a wicked nosebleed from that.
That's going to be my prediction. I missed a little. I had said Martavis Bryant would be a top 5 fantasy receiver. He was top 15, so it was almost. But he had a good game.
Not
so
bad.
I don't feel too bad about that.
That's a good pick.
But we will not live in a world where Jameis Winston turns it over fewer than 2 times and win.
That's a pretty conservative, a number. I think you should set it at 2 for the over/under. Come on. No,
okay. Well, it has to be a half because then I can't have a push, so I'll do 2.5.
You can do whatever you want. I'm just kidding you.
Actually, no, that's less. That's easier if it's over under 2.5.
Yeah, he's gonna have one for sure. Does it have to be him personally, or just the team?
I think it's harder if it has to be him.
Oh, okay, yeah. Then you can 1.5's good. Then I'm with you.
Yeah, because I think if I made it 2.5, then it's like, well, yeah, if he gets 3 turnovers, obviously. So I think a situation where Jameis Winston turns it over personally 2 times and the Vikings still win in spite of that, I think is impossible.
Now I'm catching on. All right, well, that pretty much sums up the show. Want to encourage everyone to follow us on Facebook. We crossed 10,000 Facebook followers about 2 weeks ago, which is mind-boggling and amazing. We're going to be heavily promoting our Twitter now, which Luke handles, which means it's actually of some quality. That's at purplePTSD. Check out the at Viking Territory. It's not Vikings Territory on Twitter. It's Vikings Territory on Facebook. And check in next week for more optimistic coverage from the, what was it? Delusionally Destitute?
No, Dispassionate Detachment.
Dispassionate Detachment podcast. Thanks for listening.